26, 2015 regular meeting of the Town of Pittsboro Board of Commissioners. Call the meeting to order and ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. Commissioner Farrell, please.
Sir, would everybody rise for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Our first order of business will be to approve the consent agenda, which has two items on it tonight: our May 11th meeting minutes and certificate of sufficiency from the clerk on the jail and park annexation. Any changes to that? Additions, deletions? Not so. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. The consent agenda is passed. Next order of business will be to approve the regular meeting agenda. Do you have any additions, deletions to that? If not, entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. The agenda is approved. Which brings us to citizen matters. We have one citizen signed up. Call Mrs. Sherry Curtis.
Yes. Tried to use the outlet up here for my computer, but I couldn't get it to work, so
Okay.
I had to put it on the table back there. If y'all don't mind turning and looking that way, I have an issue that who here is on the Board of Commissioners? Because I'm not into politics, so here. You're on
The board is up
Y'all-
here. And
And
Ms. Curtis, could I ask you to state your name and address for the record, and I'll remind you that public comments are limited to 5 minutes.
Sherry Curtis is my name. I live at 19 Thrift Street, and I have a situation. I hope someone can help me because the town has yet to. So I live. If y'all can y'all come back here because you're not going to be able to see it. Can you walk back here? You can get up and walk back here, right? Can y'all get up and walk back here? Yeah. You walked in for the cars. Yeah. Really appreciate it. Spent a lot of time on this. Thank you. Diner, Pittsboro Elementary School. That ball field is a half a mile away from my house. I've contacted the town mayor and the town manager and other officials who continue to ignore me and pass me around. There's my house, ball field. It's a beautiful place to live. There's a county line right there. There's my house, town, county. There's my house, corner of Thrift Street and Brown Street. Dog, Chester, ball field, and I'm told that's okay. That should not be a problem. Ball field, lights, that's from my yard. From my living room window, I should not have to shut blackout curtains in daylight. That's the corner of my house, or the street light in the corner yard. I've spent thousands of dollars trying to remedy the situation, and nothing happens overnight. Things have to grow, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Duke Energy came out and replaced a 75-watt LED with 50-watt roadway LEDs. There is a neighborhood LED. If You go to Progress Energy website, there's 51 Frisch Street light. It's ridiculous, it's horrible, And it lights across the street, it doesn't light the street. Ball field. And this is a 17-inch screen, so put it light side. And it's horrible. And if I'm the only one that sees this, then I need to be put in a straitjacket because that's very difficult. I live right on the corner and I can see all 4 of these LED lights from my house. And there's only 30 homes in this, there's less than 30 homes in this neighborhood. 4 of those LED lights are affecting 10 houses. And it's horrible. And we have this 2012 lighting ordinance. I cannot imagine if I was somebody who sat down for hours on end, whoever did, I have no idea. Somebody approved it, but this is like, the intent of this chapter is to preserve and protect the nighttime use and enjoyment of all property through the use of good lighting practices. Is that good lighting? I mean, good design standards and professional installation and design, lights to install, control glare and light trespass, and to conserve energy while maintaining security and productivity. I mean, what kind of security is that? You can do anything you want, the shadow is there, but we got LED and it's real efficient, so I don't understand. And then we have a lighting system if you're not in compliance. You know, they put together a thing where you can submit if someone's not in compliance. Well, the town is not in compliance. Duke Energy cannot do anything with these lights. It's up to the town. I have talked hours on end and dealt with this for almost a year. Look at that. That is like 12:30 at night. Look at that. I mean, I'm not making this up. There's no flash with this. There's nothing. It's just a straight up picture. And I'm tired of being lied to, and I'm tired of being ignored, and I'm tired of being passed around, and I'm not an idiot. Something's got to happen. You could read a book in that. I wasn't there when I moved in. I asked for something dimmer on the corner, and we get 4 bright freaking LEDs that are erroneous. I mean, it just provides no. What purpose does that provide? If I was a robber, I could do all kinds of things outside of that light. Too much. So, I'm here. I have all of this on DVD, CD. I have in chronological order conversation, emails starting June 23rd of 2014, getting passed around with Brian Grusbeck, John Petit, Stuart Bass, probably somebody else, I don't know, the Duke people, you know, and I've tried to resolve it, spending money, doing my thing, hanging up curtains, but I'm not a shut-in, and I do not exist within the walls of my home. And I moved here because I love North Carolina, and I love Pittsburgh, and it's got me affected. My heart, my high blood pressure for the first time in my whole life. And it's really affecting. I mean, it's not a subjective thing. This is our lighting ordinance, and so here's the real song. That's where I go. I do a 180 when these lights come on, and it affects me, and it's real. It's happening in towns all over the country, y'all. Thank you for your time. Anybody wants any of this? Here's all the emails. Do what you want. Throw it in the trash. I don't care. What you have to bounce. So what does it have to bounce?
I think if you just leave those with the town clerk, we can get copies of it.
I think we'll have to bounce.
We have copies for everybody.
I can't. If anybody else wants any of this,
Well, I mean, like,
I'm easy to get a hold of. I'm right there on 19th Street, and I'd love to have you come by at night. I'm sorry, you seem interested. I'll give you.
All right.
Check.
Nice to meet you. All right.
Okay, well, that was the only citizen matters speaker, so we'll move into the regular agenda. Item number 1, annexation request for, this is a public hearing. We have actually 2 public hearings. So I need a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. We are in public hearing. We'll conduct 2 public hearings. First one will be on annexation request for Chatham Park Investors LLC. And perhaps I should have noted this beforehand, that we don't have any citizens signed up to speak. But Mr. Manager, do you want the planner to give his brief anyway, or should we refer that to him? We've already had one briefing on it, and we'll have another one. This one is the adoption.
I think maybe just have Mr. Bass set the table for us.
Okay.
This is annexation 2015-02. Again, the applicant owner is Chatham Park Investors. It's located off Suttles Road in the Planned Development District. No change to the zoning. The acreage proposed is 29.29 acres. It's contiguous to existing corporate limits, and essentially this is the remaining half of the medical office complex that is currently being reviewed and a portion under construction. This would incorporate the hospice site that you guys will be seeing shortly, as well as part of the road. Water and wastewater lines are adjacent and or being planned to the site. And again, this public hearing is required by T-168-31 and was set and legally advertised for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. As I noted that nobody has signed up for the public hearing, if board members want to ask Mr. Bass questions, you could deny it, or you could defer that until the meeting where we take this up for consideration. Do we have any questions for tonight? Okay, thank you. Next item is, next public hearing item is public hearing on our FY 2015-2016 budget. And again, we have no citizens signed up to speak on the budget unless somebody will indicate otherwise. Anybody here to talk on the budget, please identify yourselves. Now I don't see any hands in the air, so we have no citizen input on the public hearing on the budget.
While we're in public hearing, I do have one question for Mr. Bass. In the estimated ad valorem tax revenue equation that's provided, it talks about a valuation based on 24.19 acres as opposed to the full annexed property of 29.29. So it's a deduct of 5.1 acres.
I can try to answer that.
Yeah.
I think based on the information that was provided to us by the applicant, it could be our first attempt at making this estimate assumed that 5 of the acres would be backed out because of the proposed the hospice facility.
So the hospice would be UNC owned?
Correct.
Got it.
And not taxable.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, there being no citizens coming forward to speak on the budget, I'll entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. We are out of public hearing. Move on to old business item number 1, which is ABC board update from Mr. Jim Nass.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. On behalf of the ABC Board, I'm pleased to come before you with a very, very brief report and some money. The ABC store continues to do very well. Through 3 quarters, we are up $100,000 plus on revenues, and our taxes are up about $25,000 because, of course, we pay taxes on more that we sell. But our other expenses are down $15,000. So we're generating that extra $100,000 revenue with essentially $15,000 less in operating expenses than we had last year, which is a real tribute to our general manager, Nancy Gooch, and the staff over there that are doing a bang-up job of serving more customers and selling more product with fewer resources. One thing I can report to you, I think at the last meeting I told you that we were the last item sort of on our checklist of taking care of our employees was figuring out a way to get health care to our full-time employees. And we managed that, and so our full-time employees are covered as of April 1, fully covered. And that's just another strong benefit that we think was very appropriate for people that go out of their way to really work hard for us. So we're very happy to get that done. We've now got leave in place, we have sick leave in place, we have vacation time in place, and our final kind of step in making this a regular place to work was to get this health care done. So we're very happy to get that done. I do have checks in the amount of tonight in the amount of, let's see, $8,450 for the town and $2,143 for law enforcement, and this is for the third quarter. So for the first three quarters, we're at around $31,700, $32,000 that we've distributed to the town. The fourth quarter will bring us up to the amount that we budgeted, and I can tell you in our draft budget, which we will consider at our meeting tomorrow night, our budget for next year is $55,000 for distribution to the town. And we will meet that without any question. So that's kind of where we're at, and I just wanted to do that and provide the money to you. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
No, that's good. I just have one question. How many full-time employees do you have?
We have 2 full-time and 3 part-time.
And part-time, do they have any benefits for the insurance?
They do not. They have accumulated leave that we've been able to provide them, and they do have that sort of thing, but not health.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yes, always. Great job.
Thanks. And I'll pass these checks on to you.
Thank you. Well, Jim, I want to echo the thanks of the other board members here. This may be the last report we take where you are going off the board, I understand.
No, I'm going to stay.
We already? Okay.
We do have a vacancy coming up. Dick Harris is going off the board the middle of June. He and his wife are moving out of the area altogether. So we're busy on that. I hope to have a recommendation for Commissioner Fiocco and then on to the rest of the commissioners here very shortly to fill that. So we'll miss Dick, but Ned and I will hang in there.
Well, that's very good news indeed. Thank you, sir, for your good work.
Okay, thank you all.
Old business, we have a site plan review for the Pittsburgh Feed Store. Mr. Bass, will you introduce this one?
This is site plan 2014-07, Pittsburgh Feed Building. It's Commerce Court, US 64 Business, lot number 10. It's pretty much across from the existing business. It's an undeveloped site, proposed commercial building of approximately 4,486 square feet. The towns have been reviewed in accordance with the applicable development ordinances by appropriate departments. It was recommended for approval by the Planning Board at its regular scheduled meeting on February 2nd, 2015. And staff recommends approval of the proposed request subject to the issuance of a stormwater permit by the town engineer. And the applicant's construction manager, if you've got any questions.
Let's see here. Any questions from board members? Can we put the map up? Site, just the site plan?
We have, that's the rendering.
Okay.
Well, we do.
We got them here.
I have the plan. Do I have the site plan on there?
I just want to clarify something. I could be reading this wrong, probably am reading it wrong, but the way I interpret the site plan was that the entrance to the store would be facing away from East Street, facing to the south.
That's correct. And East Street is here, Bogan will come off South Street.
That seemed a little peculiar to me, so I'm interested in hearing why you wanted to do that. You know, if you think about all of the rest of East Street going all the way down to the credit union and all the store frontages from there back to the traffic circle facing East Street.
Bill, I think there's some confusion. When you mean front, you're meaning the driveway access off of the side road, but the front of the building will be facing East Street.
You'll see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the front of the building will face East Street.
Okay.
All the access will come off the side street.
I was misreading it.
Which, more than likely, I can't tell you how much. We couldn't come in off East Street because we'd have to have a decel lane and then we've been too close to the intersection.
Yeah, okay.
So we didn't have,
I just thought you had your main entrance facing south, but you don't.
that's what it looks like.
No, I think that makes more sense than trying to deal with the driveway so close to the roadway intersection, so better way to do it.
That's really the only question I had. Anybody else?
I just have one. Will you guys be using the existing business also?
Yes, we're going to split the pet part out, so this new building will be more of a pet store, take all of our pet products from the existing store and go over there. And we'll still be in the regular store with the feed and the lawn and garden and stuff, so.
It's good, like, I want to see a vacant building across
No,
the
it's
street.
not going to be there. We just need more room.
Good.
Great.
It's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Where's your problem?
I think I've got a couple of questions that probably are for Fred from an engineering stormwater perspective. Fred, thank you. So the idea is to retrofit or reconstruct the old pond that I guess has not been maintained. Probably hasn't been doing its job completely, although the development's not built out. So that leads to the question, is that pond designed to accommodate all of the lots in the subdivision, including the public roadways?
Yes.
Okay. And is that maxed out at 70% impervious?
Just below, I think.
Okay. Are any of the lots restricted?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The pond is approximately halfway complete to its original design. It's probably been 12 years or more. It's Mr. Deacon's responsibility to do that. So the issue is now, what does the town do? What's our obligation if Mr. Deacon does not complete the pond restoration in time for the Pittsburgh Feed to open?
My second question.
Thank you.
Are we going to require a bond to be posted so that if in fact it fails, we can execute it and not hold these folks up?
I don't know the answer, but I'd love to pursue some option with Mr. Messick and Mr. Brucebeck on what we could do to prevent Pittsburgh Feed from enjoying the benefits of their new store and being able to move in with a CO when they're scheduled to, as opposed to, waiting for a third party to do something. I guess technically, that pond was built due to the water supply watershed rules before our ordinance. So technically, the pond is not meeting the design standard, and I guess technically they're in violation of the original intent and design. I haven't spoken to anyone about the old rules and what we could do to get that moved along.
Well, it seems that the old rules provided for a bond to be posted for this exact activity when the subdivision was approved, when the stormwater management plan was approved. It sounds like if there's not a bond in place now, that should have been put in place for the benefit of the folks who buy lots, right? And for the benefit of the owner who is selling the lots.
Yeah, I don't believe there's a bond posted up. I don't think I've ever seen documentation of that.
How far back was this go? When was that bond first built?
I think you said 95 or 2005.
I think it was 2005.
04, 05, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd hate to see these folks move forward relying on a third party that doesn't perform, and now the town's the bad guy who says, sorry, you've invested all this money and you've got a great looking building, but we can't let you operate.
Right.
I want to try to find a way to avoid that.
That's my feeling exactly.
And we've had numerous conversations with the owner.
Yeah.
He's well aware of this.
And he's starting to work towards getting it done. He did part of the work already. I know he wanted to clean it out, but it was raining so much that he couldn't get in there to do it. So that, I know that's been holding him up.
Have you purchased the property?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
We
Okay.
bought the property in 05,
Okay.
so we've had it for a while.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, let's find a way to make that get fixed. And I mean, these folks are probably going to be in 6-8 months, coming into the dry period of the year. Should be able to get some work done.
Right. I'll pursue that and see where we can go.
The only other comment I have is, I think on the grading and erosion control plan, it makes a note that it's going to be in accordance with the state design manual and standards, but of course the county is now doing our erosion control, so you may want to reconsider if that has an impact on the design.
It requires a land disturbance permit from Chatham County using their ordinance. It's similar to the state.
It's not exactly. So.
Yeah, it's not exact, so you'll want to check to see if there's any modifications necessary, or so you're not surprised by a comment from the county that, or go submit an application to the state and they application. Can't process this. Right. Okay, that's all I have.
I had a question about the pond. Who maintains that? Is that maintained by the developer over time? Or is that
It was never maintained.
But I mean, in the future.
Right. That would be the HOA, and they'd have to do an operations and maintenance agreement, just like we require today, and it will have to be recorded so that we can follow it. So that's right. Mr. Deacons mentioned an HOA before, so I don't know what legal structure he's thinking of at this point.
Well, we'll be interested to see how that comes out.
There is a HOA in our covenants, but Dan Deacon has not turned it over to the lot owner association yet, so that's why it's all on him right now.
Okay.
So it is in the covenants for the developer to be an HOA.
So this is not part of it. This is part of it. It's like it's easy to. Okay. If there are no other questions from the board, entertain a motion on this subject.
Make a motion that we approve the site plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None being opposed, the site plan is approved. Brings us to manager's updates on capital projects.
Nothing written for you this evening. So I'll keep it brief. A lot of our work has been going into the materials that you see in front of us this evening, particularly with regard to the budget, but also a couple of the development issues as well. I can say this from a staffing perspective, we are looking forward to, well, bittersweet. On one hand, I'm not looking forward to having Stuart leave, as you're aware, in a few days, a couple weeks, less than a couple weeks. But in the meantime, I think we're fortunate that we should be able to use services of Roger Weldon and Clarion to help fill in the gap. In the meantime, we've gone over some terms with them, and I think we can provide some overlap in terms of having staff in to kind of get a feel from Stuart for where everything is operationally a few days before he leaves. And so we'll have somebody here up to speed before Stuart actually departs us on June 5th. So again, not looking forward to that, but I think we've got some agencies in place. We'll be looking at posting that position long term, and initially we're looking at posting one position for planning director. It's on a slightly longer track for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's looking for a skill set, I think, that we want to be really cognizant of all of the requirements of that skill set and make sure that we're making the right selection. So we're looking at approximately 90 days for that. We'll be posting that here probably in the next few days. But also, too, we're going to have the ability to scale up our contracted work with Clarion. So they can certainly give us the help that we need, and they've got a pretty sturdy bench in place, and they're certainly close enough to provide us the support that's necessary through that. So that those pieces are moving forward. We'll be closing, today is the 26th, we'll be closing the administrative assistance position for the planning and engineering and parks departments this, I believe, on the 28th. And we'll be looking to interview those positions. Initially, that position will be going to work over in the existing building, and will be helping us transition on some of the other issues that are associated with that department's expansion. So I guess those are the big ticket items, and there's a lot more discussion that we can have, I think, once we start talking a little bit more about the budget in terms of some of the things that we're working on. That I can certainly able to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? I guess I'd just like to take this up here, realizing that this is probably the last, it is the last board meeting that Mr. Bass will present to us. And first, I want to thank him for his, I guess has it been 5 years? About 5 years of service. Yeah, and state publicly for the record that he brought to us a level of depth of experience and training and education that we hadn't enjoyed before, and I think he's well professionalized our planning operation dramatically over the last 5 years. It'd be sorely missed. So,
we will be doing some social going away for Mr. Bass to see your details.
Okay. We want to go into looks like we're ready to go into our, what's the board's pleasure? Do you want to jump right into the work session, or do you have, you want to do your commissioner concerns first?
Do the work session.
I think everybody's ready to jump to the work session, and we yield our time to that task tonight. We'll save our concerns for another day. So, Mr. Manager, I think we'll just...
Do we want to receive the financial report?
See this one here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Finance officer. 2014-15 financial report as of 30 April.
just waiting for Mr. Manager to put up the summary report for you to all look at. Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Oh, yes. Okay. That's a good idea. Alrighty. So referring to the slide that you see in front of you regarding the financial summary report, this is for July through April 30th, not April 31st, which you see up there. My apologies for my typo. We are now in month 10, which means that basically we would be at 83% of our budget, recognizing it for revenue and for expenditures. Starting with the general fund, overall revenues, the revenue of the 3.5 million is approximately 5% ahead of budget, and revenue is exceeding overall expenditures by $875,000 and change. Again, revenue is ahead of projection because of the ad valorem taxes and the timing of that. Overall, general fund expenditures are approximately below budget by about 17% at the 66.49%, but again, they're on target. You received the encumbrance and expenditure report that details more of this in much more detail by department and by fund. Moving on to the enterprise fund, current revenues exceeding expenditures by almost $202,000. Both are below projection as far as revenue and expenditures are concerned, but that's where we are with the enterprise fund. There was no debt service for the month of April. Regarding our capital reserve for the enterprise fund, we continue to receive water and sewer access charges. This month we received almost $13,000 in revenue, and it was primarily for Powell Place. As I mentioned at our last month's meeting, I had been reviewing all of our balance sheet accounts and also looking at all of our expenditure accounts and had to do some reclassification, and that was reflected in the April numbers. So that is now a project that's completed. You also received at the last meeting a fund balance and reserve policy which was approved, and we will be presenting our draft budget to you this evening. Also, I'll bring to you at the next board meeting a draft of a purchasing policy. This is something that I drafted for a grant that we were going to receive, or we've applied for, and we hopefully will receive from the Governor's Crime Commission. And they requested a purchasing protocol as part of their application package. So that's something that was reviewed by the manager. We just want the board to also see that, so I'll bring that to you at the next meeting. That's it, unless you have any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, Nancy, will we be making any debt service payments in the next month?
Yes, we'll be making quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
June has a pretty big debt service with the water and sewer. I think it's about $210,000, maybe a little more than that. I think probably about $260,000 that we'll be making for a debt service payment for water and sewer.
That would still have us about $100,000 less than we budgeted, so that would be good.
I'm going off the top of my head, so I could be wrong.
Right.
And the debt service could be more for June, but I do know we have a lot of debt service. And the one I do know for sure is $210,000 that's due June 1st, because I'll be doing a wire transfer for that one. So that one I know, but there's another one too that is in the hopper for a check, and that was about $60,000. So that's $270 right there. But I think there's one more. I just can't think of what it is, Commissioner. But I suspect we'll spend that down. But I can have more detail for you next month.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to see that we've yet to get the benefit of appropriating the fund balance, but it sounds like that might be coming into play.
I hope not.
Yeah.
We'll see what next month, what May looks like, and then we'll see what June looks like. But I can have more information for you at the next meeting.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
The general fund had me scratching my head for a little while there when I saw this report relative to last month's report, where we now have $300,000 and some odd more in our budget but that's the 150 from Chatham Park.
Mhm.
It's the loan funds, I think, for the police cars. So I satisfied myself that it was making sense. One thing I asked Jim Nass at the beginning of the meeting, or prior to the meeting, I just thought that the $18,000 from ABC revenues was low. Based on his records, he's thinking he's contributed closer to 27 just to the town, and then I think maybe another 5 or 6 to the law enforcement side of it. So I was just trying to figure out that 18, because I've seen Jim come up here and keep handing us $9,000, $8,000, $10,000 checks, and so can you help understand that?
I'd have to research that, because
Okay.
these are numbers that I'm pulling right from the general ledger, which is how, when the funds come in, they're automatically classified for the ABC revenues. So I'd have to look into that further, but this is what I know has been reported that's in the general ledger.
Okay.
So I'll look into that
If
for you.
wouldn't mind.
I'd be happy to.
Great, thank you.
You're
If I
welcome.
may, Commissioner, I'm not sure, but we get a portion of the county's revenues for contracted to provide police services, and we may not have received that yet. And that may be a couple of thousand. So I'm not sure about that. That may be part of it, because the county pays us on a different schedule from the town.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
it's
the
about
count-
$1,000 difference,
Yeah.
though.
So I don't know if that's all one.
Some of what you're doing, Wendy's sensing there is, if you get a check in July for May and June, it gets posted back to the prior year, right?
Well, we typically receive the revenues quarterly from the ABC store, and so yes, this is representing, I believe, third quarter, which hasn't
Right.
been posted yet, and then I'll put that, recognize it as a receivable on our books at the end of June, so we can recognize that as revenue, and we typically don't get that till about August, as far as
What's
that.
the town share on the check you just got?
$8,450.
So we get four of those, and so it'll get up to, so it looks to me like she's only.
His number might reflect these two, Commissioner. I don't know, but I'll be happy to research that.
He was thinking that it was without that.
Oh, without this,
Yeah,
okay.
but
Okay.
it may have been that he made one payment that was credited to last year. that
Which is possible.
He's not accounting for.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see.
Mhm. Yeah, be glad to look into it.
Okay.
While we're on that note, looking at the year-to-date revenues collected for water and sewer, they at 75% or 77%, they feel like 9-month numbers instead of 10-month numbers.
We're about 10% behind, which would be about right as far as our revenue projections.
Yeah. So do you think these are actually reflecting 10 months, or could they be 9 months worth of revenue? Because of the lag time.
We bill by a month in arrears. So in essence, this really is 9 months worth of revenue when you think about it in that perspective.
The fact that it's 75%, we shouldn't be alarmed about that.
It's about on target then.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Plus, I know that May and June are always, there's an uptick in water use when people start irrigating.
People, right, irrigation, we did see an increase in that this past month.
Okay, good. Okay. I don't have any more questions on anybody else. Questions?
Oh, God bless you. Thank you.
Okay. With that, Mr. Manager, I think we're ready to go into your,
Okay.
for our budget work session. You introduce that.
Before we get started, I have some promise to give this back.
Oh, okay. This is part of the,
Yeah, it's Rex guy, but that. Thank you all for taking the time to do this tonight. This is the, per general statute, required, we held the required public hearings for the annual budget. The only other thing that's technically required between now and the end of June is that you actually pass a budget. and so approve a budget of some sort. And so tonight, you had the second draft copy, and there were a few changes as we played around with some revenues and some other things to tweak it, but it's not drastically different from the first one that you received in the first memo that you received. But I put before you tonight another memo which just provides some of the highlights, a snapshot going into tonight for what we have, and these things are certainly subject to change as you move forward with it. Before we get too far into it, I would like to give a hearty thanks to the staff. I think that our players are sitting back here in the back of the room, and they're certainly able to answer any questions you guys have and provide some more detail. I think this is the third budget that I've had the pleasure of helping put together, and I can assure you that everyone in here works equally hard on it, and is very conciliatory and agreeable and willing to look at the big picture with all of this. So I am very much appreciated for staff for that and for all the work they put into it. And of course, for our new, I say new, I don't know if I should be calling her new anymore, finance director. Certainly her first budget hit the ground running with it, and is doing a bang-up job and always provides more than what I've asked for, and a very good way of looking at things. And so I'm very optimistic that we can certainly do much more than the bare minimum moving forward until we're required to pass things. So tonight, without much further ado, if I could just go into some of the highlights here with the memo, set the table, and then we can get into the more specific issues of the budget, and get into more of a departmental and line look at it, if you like, and get into some of your questions. But let me first get these broad highlights. General fund revenues, we're looking at 5% increase in general fund revenues. Well, actually, we're looking at a 5% increase in ad valorem revenues, and that's essentially because of the increase in our valuations that we received from Chatham County. That, in large part, is why we, for the first time in 3 years, at least as I sit here and talk to you, would not be contemplating a tax increase. Of course, this is before you guys take a couple of whacks at it, and if we're going to be adding a lot to it, then depending on how much we're willing to maybe take out, as of now, I think we're probably going to be able to assume, make our general fund expenditures balance our revenues. Well, actually, we're going to be a little bit short in terms of expenditures over revenues, but it's going to be close enough that we can easily assume that with our unreserved fund balance. Now, just a little bit of an aside on that, you'll recall a couple of meetings ago that we reviewed a policy to set a fund balance. We reviewed a fund balance or a reserve policy, and we set that at 15%. And if we were to assume this proposed transfer from general fund balance, from our general fund balance, so in other words, if we were to go with this budget as we have it written right now, we would need $96,000 and change from our general fund balance, which we can easily assume and keep that well over our 15%. And I know, Nancy, you were doing some figuring as late as Friday on what that balance is.
About $538,000 is 15% of our unrestricted fund balance.
So how much over that would we be?
I'm sorry?
How much over that would we be?
I think I calculated we were 25 or 26%.
Okay.
So
we're at 25 or 26%. And
that was as of April 30th, from the balance sheet perspective.
Okay, which is well over the 15% more than we said. If that type of analysis is important, and I think it is in this case. Anytime we use fund balance, we have to figure out where we are on that floor that we've recently set. So last year, you recall that we set that we took a draw of $133,000, and that was actually figuring in a substitute to the enterprise fund. We're pretty darn close to balancing, if not balancing, in last year's budget in terms of our general fund. But we as you recall, collected to subsidize the enterprise fund, general fund revenues, which we're able to do, but it's not something that the accountants or me or LGC would recommend that you do too many years in a row for any number of reasons. So I think, relatively speaking, things are in okay shape there. We'll get into some of the dirtier details here with the expenditures. And we're increasing our overall general fund expenditures by 9.4%. And you can see that coming out in a few different areas, one of which is salary and wage adjustments. And this is figuring in a 2.5% increase in salary and wages. This is higher than the CPI, the Consumer Price Index increase, which year to year was reported at 1.6%. And so it's not a huge increase, but it's a lot better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, as my dad would have said. I think he probably still says that about some things. So we have that written in should you approve. Now, the issue with having said that, that also includes, for what this is worth, that also includes my salary as well. So if you were to approve this budget, we would have an increase for 2.5% for me as well, but I would not be taking, actually functionally, I would not be taking that increase until such time as you reviewed and decided to adjust my salary one way or another on that. So that just kind of figures in worst case scenario, so to speak, that I got a 2.5% increase. But I don't think operationally we plan on, I know operationally we don't plan on plugging that in for me, so we probably need to tweak that a little bit. But that'll be at the high end. We're adding new positions to planning and engineering, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and we have those factored in this budget as well. Health insurance, we were really nervous about this one. We're looking at our bottom line to increase by 13% on that. Dental costs are also increasing. Ms. White and I met with our third-party administrator recently, and what's interesting is that we're right at that. Mr. Terry can probably talk a little bit more about this too. Probably came across this in his travels in my position, but we're right at that, tiptoeing up to that threshold of 50 full-time positions, which would create kind of create a different economy of scale for us in terms of what we would be eligible for with coverage. And we're not at 43 positions right now. We had 3 more, 4 more. We're not going to probably, in all likelihood, be there this year. But we could be, as insurance rates go up, I think the bright side is that as we add personnel costs, we could be looking at a different scale as far as insurance goes. I can't quote exactly what those figures are right now, but it's something to keep in mind. Transit, you guys will probably be talking a little bit more about that this evening, but I am, this is in no way, shape, or form is a statement from me personally one way or another on this, but we plugged in $12,000 simply based on, as far as I can recall off the top of my head, the last 3 or 4 budgets where we're using contractual services. We're plugging in $12,000 for transit services in contractual services. Obviously, we have some issues to talk about, I think, on that in the future. And it is my understanding that and Mayor Perry, I think, and others will probably talk a little bit more about this as well, but just as a quick update, Chatham Transit Network approached the Chatham County Board of Commissioners today, this afternoon, and made a proposal that would okay, so this is the email that I got from Charlie as of this afternoon. The County Board of Commissioners actually approved a request from Chatham Transit Network, $120,740. That would, of that $120,000, $100,000 and change could be attributed to the county, and then they would be Chatham Transit Network would be requesting from Pittsboro approximately $20,000 to help financially provide provide the services, the transit services through Chatham Transit Network that were previously provided by Chapel Hill Transit. And again, I think some of you may have had other discussions on that as well. Let's see, this down here, I didn't read this either, but the Board of Commissioners had considered contributing $20,000 for the town's future pocket park. Yeah, so it doesn't look like that's something that they're necessarily approving right away. That's just as an aside. Charlie threw that in at no extra cost. So anyway, that's that. And then.
So is was that saying that they considered $20,000 for the park but put it into transit? Is that what that said?
I think they're two separate things.
The County Board of Commissioners. So it. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah.
So I just got that today, and that's that news. Economic development, there's a new line in general fund expenditures called economic.
One question about before we get on.
I'm sorry. Yes.
The bus service also services Fowler City. Can Fowler City contribute anything to this?
Wondering that, but I'm
Yeah,
not aware.
They contributed 5 and we did 15.
Yeah, they never have, but it would hurt to ask. The demographics suggest that about a fifth of the riders are going in that direction.
Is that something the board would like to follow up on with Fowler City?
I think it's fair to ask.
Good idea. I can send the email to Mayor Grimes, who wants to know the manager.
Especially the figures about 20%, 35%.
I think they have I think it's some kind of order of 15, 20% of the riders.
I believe Chatham Transit picks up people when they ride Chatham Transit, and that they Chatham Transit delivers them to the bus service, which is good. And there's quite a few people in Fowler City who are able to work in the hospital because of that bus line. Who wouldn't otherwise be able to do it. That would make it closer to what we budgeted. Right.
I would question the service that's contemplated. Right now, I know they're picking up the third run. PX route is running the first 2, and I think the size of the vehicle is going to be substantially different than the bus that the PX route is running. And I know that PX bus is probably got 25 people on it for the first 2 runs. And I don't know if the vehicles that Chatham Transit has can actually accommodate that many people. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I've noticed ridership every time Jamie takes the bus. She says it's full of people. Yeah.
I mean, Chatham Transit has enough. Maybe they would have enough buses for the busy time people can do.
It'd be good to know what that.
Yeah, for people.
Yeah.
I had asked Brian Litchfield to do some number crunching about a possible rate increase, but I guess it's $3 now to get on the bus for a pass. The passes are sold for $65 a month. And those rates haven't changed since the first year of so we bumped up to $3.50 and $70 or $3.50 and $85 or something. Interesting to see what kind of revenue that would generate. But
the transit actually comes to people's houses and pick them up and take them to the bus line. It's really pretty neat. That's incredible public transit right there.
They get a point to point. They'll take it to the doctor. They'll pick you up and take you back home.
Okay. So Just to be clear on that follow-up, you want me to go ahead and follow up with Siler City generally? It sounds like the mayor's going to do a little bit of legwork on that as well and find out what, if any, contribution Siler City has or would be interested in willing to make. Just
We need to do a sales job. I think it's really present in a positive way.
I'd like not to give up on the group in Chapel Hill and Carver, quite frankly. I would like to have a conversation. I don't know if you've had any opportunity to reach out to them, but, they made a unilateral decision that I think is short-sighted, and I'd like to talk with them about it.
Yes, we're growing. It's really kind of a great
Yeah.
pandemic cut back.
Yeah,
And I would think to start with pick up around here.
And I think like you say, it's a sales pitch almost to them
Yeah.
to say, look at, it's not 100% right now, but it's ever increasing. And if we don't have it, it's going to be a lot harder.
I think it's an important link to maintain. I know that we've spent money on it when we really didn't have the money to do it.
Keep that connection.
Yeah. So, Mr. Mayor, would you be willing to reach out
Well,
to
I'm trying to
the
think,
mayors?
I'm trying to think of, I can understand that the need to do that had the county decided that they would not support it. The county seems to be going to budget the lion's share of the reserve we're asking for, so the impact on us is going to be minimal. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the Chapel Hill Transit partners, and they're trying to recoup, from their point of view, they're trying to recoup what they lost 4 years ago when Chatham County ceased its participation. So from their point of view, they've been carrying Chatham County for 4 years. So I don't know that go up there and make it, to characterize it as that they are dropping out of the game may be difficult. They're going to characterize it as they're tired of carrying the load for Chatham County. And Chatham County seems to be willing to get back in the game, so
Right.
I'm not sure what our conversation would be about.
I think it'd be...
That would be a conversation that the county should have with them rather than us.
Well, I think it would be about recognizing that their contribution now is greatly diminished and the county's back in the game. And if we're, progressive communities are talking about having transit as a real way to be environmentally friendly, economically, benefit folks. I think there's a lot of strong arguments to be made to them. I'd like for us to try it.
Because I think that we did start this line with them, and they did pay most of it. But I think it would be just a good opportunity to talk with them and let them know, it's going well. We anticipate growth might go better. But I think that some things need to be pointed out to them.
And maybe they weren't aware of that when
Yeah.
they made that decision.
Right.
Like, it'd be good to have a conversation.
Just a conversation in general. But
Well, I can reach out to the two mayors and see if I can get invited to the next Chapel Hill Transit Partners meeting. And if Commissioner Gill wants to come in,
I'd love to.
We can have.
Make sure we're part of the conversation. I think
Right.
that's important.
Right.
They'll
Look to the future.
they'll entertain us as visitors for their next meeting. Happy to try to set that up.
Great idea.
List here.
Sorry, Brian, that was a...
No, it's-
That was a tough bit there.
That's what we are all here to do.
Well, while we're on the subject, so since we seem to be drilling down on this, the manager's got 12,000 in here, and if I understand the memo correctly, you need another 8,000 to get to the goal line to save this thing for July and August.
Yeah, as of today's action, it's what it sounds like.
Yeah, so I would like to get the board to commit to do that at least through the 20,000, and then empower the manager to work with Manager Horn and Chapel Hill Transit Director Litchfield during July to hammer out a contract. And ideally, if he can, if they can come to some sort of an agreement over modest rate increase or some other source of funds, he doesn't have to spend all $20,000, but I want to give him the tools he needs so that they can hammer out a contract, plus uninterrupted service. If we don't give him that leverage, when we wait until we go have our meeting with the two Jefferson Carmel mayors, then we're risking having interrupted service, and then all those people that are riders will find some other way to get to work, and getting them back again could be difficult. So I think it's important that we, if we want this service, that we empower Mr. Horn and Mr. Respect to get the contract hammered out during July, and then we can engage in discussions about what's going to happen next year.
And also engage Sour City.
Engage Sour City as well. I hope we can change that 12 under 2C to 20. If the board's interested in saving this, I think I'm very encouraged the county is
Okay. Sounds good. Economic development is the line in the general fund expenditures, 4,100. We have 10,419 budgeted. Of that figure, these aren't large amounts, but just to give you some background on what they mean, a familiar relationship that we have is with the Shadow EDC. We pay $4,700 to them in order to help us, in order to basically have them help us with economic development activities. And I know in the last year we've used them a couple of different times on things that we flat out don't have the staff or the expertise to do, and so that's been very valuable. And I don't see any need to discontinue that relationship whatsoever. The other item is a new issue with Retire NC. And you'll recall a couple of years ago when we were fortunate to receive that designation, partly through Commissioner Foley's very hard work, and subsequent to that, Mr. Mayor Terry's involvement. We've been able to keep that designation. They've put a lot of work into creating a website and some marketing materials, and really kind of reaching out to a demographic which appears to have an interest in the Pittsboro area in terms of future development. So they're requesting, I think, some stability within their budget. I think the mayor can talk maybe a little bit more about what they're looking for and what that $6,000 would purchase. But essentially, they're looking for the town, I think, to kind of hedge some of their needs moving forward with that $6,000. Is that inaccurate?
Yeah, and I think this is worth some background discussion. I was even a little confused about why they didn't have an operating budget, and I guess I didn't understand or I'd forgotten that the initial fees that people paid to enroll in this retirency, the people that are calling their sponsors, they paid a lump sum amount, and for some reason I didn't realize it was for a 5-year period. So they pay and they don't pay again for 5 years. So and most of that money went to the $10,000 fee that went to the state of North Carolina, and so it would be retained for annual operating expenses. So their revenues, their ongoing revenue stream is like nothing. They collect this dues, but they only collect it every 5 years. So what they're trying to do is fix that problem, that they don't have an ongoing revenue stream to keep the publications up to date, maintain the website, go to periodic trade shows and represent the town. And I think the request of $6,000 is meant to allow one or two of the local representatives to attend 2 or 3 trade shows a year. This pays their travel and their lodging expenses, and then the balance of that goes toward publishing little brochures and whatnot that talk about Pittsboro and its the good things about Pittsboro that make it a good place to retire. So I think it's we want to stay invested in the NC retirements. It seems like a small amount that we're asking for.
And again, we've got, supposedly 40 to 60,000 people moving here, so that's about,
It's basically a marketing and outreach.
It is, yeah, it's exactly what it is, yeah.
I think we should discuss sometime if it's being called economic development, there might be other things we want to consider, like supporting the Pittsburgh Business Association or the Arts Council, things like that, that also contribute to economic development.
Are these organizations or a nonprofit charity?
Well, no, they're not, and so actually this money doesn't go to them, it goes to, well, it goes to, we keep it in our budget, but the only way they get reimbursed is by bringing a travel claim to Nancy. They say, I went to Arlington, Virginia for 3 days and went to a trade show, and here's my hotel receipts, and here's my mileage, and then she reimburses them for it. So we're not really giving the money to them, we're giving it to Nancy to put in the bank to pay their travel claims and invoices when they come in and have to do a print job. We're actually writing a check for $6,000. We're just putting it in the bank for her to respond to their reimbursement requests.
We act as the fiduciary agent for the organization. I think they are a nonprofit.
The EDC is a nonprofit, but
I don't think technically they are because it's just something, it's a designation that we got through tourism.
Yeah, I don't believe they are. At the state level, they're a state agency, and at the local level, they're.
I mean, basically, it's a group mostly of like Galloway Ridge, Barrington, the ones who've contributed so far, and the ones who really stand to benefit financially when people live here. That was the idea with the town, but actually money into it with different businesses together. So.
And many of those sponsors still, although they paid their fee up front, they still they find in-kind ways to do printing and whatnot.
But to your point too about, there's probably other organizations that contribute to economic development for the town.
Well, there are, but we kind of created this.
Yeah, I know. But it's good for 5 years. But yeah, I mean, I guess part of the struggle with is paying for somebody to get San Antonio and all that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that I need from my pointy-headed perspective need to advise you of is that you always have to be mindful of spending public money for public purpose. And typically what they'll do, and the EDC, the county EDC is a great example of this. We actually pay them for a service to provide us with assistance on economic development issues. And so the retire NC figure is a little bit more gray, but I think we can still justify a basic economic development purpose for that, although it's, like I said, it's a little bit murkier. If we get into, PVA or something like that, I think it's, this may be a Mr. Messick issue as well, but I think from that standpoint, we start getting into membership issues and how we really start defining how this money is used and making sure that it's used for that public purchase. What kind of widget are we actually buying with the dollar? And so.
Yeah, my baseline understanding of that law you mentioned, being able to spend public money for private purposes, is that municipalities and counties can contract with private agencies for any services that the town might otherwise do itself. But you can't just make a donation to the Boy Scouts or the Ducks Unlimited or whoever because they do good work. But you can contract with other agencies to do things that the town might otherwise do. And, we might send the staff to Alexandria to send it to Pittsburgh, but we can give out information about Pittsburgh, but we don't have, their time is better spent doing nothing, so I think this meets the test. It's, after all, an entity that we sort of created, so it's an extension, almost an extension of our municipal government. So. And I haven't actually been to one of these things, probably won't go to one, but the people that have gone, what they tell me is if you're not there, there's like 11 cities now that are in the NC Retire. So the baseline booth that goes up there is the state of North Carolina. And the state employee that comes and goes, his name escapes me now, he goes up there. Mr. Davis, yes. But if you're not there to steer them toward the pile of brochures about Pittsburgh, then
we have anyone who's moved here specific buses that we charge?
You know, I don't know that we can claim that without doing some research. I'm not sure. But they're doing a lot of work with spreadsheets, but it's amazing what comes out of these visits to these trade shows. They call them prospect sheets. It's page after page spreadsheet with names, addresses, and phone numbers, and they're showing them now how to best put that to good use.
I did ask them when they were here if they had like any concrete number, anybody living here, and I think they don't vote for it probably in a minute, but it was 2 or less. So that's good.
Well, I don't want to belabor that one.
All right. While I was sitting, I had a couple ideas on that one, but let me germinate on that a little bit and talk about this before we get too far out in front of it. So another new line item is in engineering, 4,800, and that's for the Jordan Lake Partnership, and we're going to be incurring some more costs with that moving forward, and we've budgeted $25,000 to help maintain Pittsboro's work with the Western Intake Partnership, which is the group that obviously we're a part of, but it's the group that's determining the feasibility of placing a water treatment intake on the west side of Jordan Lake, and Mr. Royal has been, previous to that, Hydra Structures has been involved with that in the past, and so they're in the application review process with that, and we're going to be spending additional monies there. Mr. Royal, do you have any comments or inputs on what you expect from the partnership in the next fiscal year?
This is basically just our pro rata share, based on our request of the total.
That's correct. The Western Intake is a subcommittee of the Jordan Lake Partnership, so it's chiefly Durham, Chatham, Owassa, and Pittsboro. So we haven't met in months, so we're actually going to meet in the next month or so. But the conversation at the last meeting was centered around what planning objective do we have for the next year, kind of to move towards the feasibility of designing a water treatment plant. So we're looking at things like kind of easements, what do we have to study, what kind of physical arrangements, development agreements, that sort of thing, intergovernmental agreements could we do, who would own the plant, would it be Durham, and we would be partners, issues like that. So we've just been talking around the periphery of that whole issue. We haven't made any decisions on which way to go. So the $25,000 would be our, 9% cost share of whatever small contracts we did with, say, a firm that does financial reporting or financial analysis or something like that. So. And then there's a standard fee for the Jordan Lake Partnership, which is the broader group. That fee is, I emailed it out, it's like $3,500 or $2,500. That's the standard annual fee for the partnership, which we may or may not do some more work with the Triangle J Council of Governments this year. Kind of as a follow-up to whatever Diener's decision is on our allocation application request. So we'll have to, we have a meeting scheduled actually with the JLP coming up. So that's all I know at this point.
What's the time frame for Diener responding?
I think it's November.
Yeah. So that would be a good while, wouldn't it? That's about 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So There was a meeting that was postponed to discuss the allocation applications last month, and I'm not sure when it's going to get back on the schedule for the Environmental Management Commission and that sort of thing. But I'm trying to keep up with it as much as I can.
So Nancy and I were just talking a little bit. That's the $25,000 that we have budgeted for this. We had a due date for that.
This is the next fiscal year.
This is plugged in currently in the next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
This would be due in this next.
This would be due in 15-16. We paid about using the monies that we received from the Chatham Park investors. We paid for this year's fee, but they were around 15,000 to 18,000.
Yeah, some of the interconnection studies and those things we're still paying for that Hazen and Sawyer's been doing. So, and the outcome of that will be identifying basically between the town and the county interconnection issues and possible water purchasing agreements with other jurisdictions and things like that for emergencies or for just purchasing water.
So this $25,000, and I think that there's a strong possibility we can back this out, at least some of it out of the general fund.
Use reserves.
And use reserves, not necessarily park all $25,000 of this in general fund, which helps that balance we were talking a little bit about earlier. I don't mean necessarily give that all to Chatham Park. Anyway, we may be able to adjust that.
But most of the 25 is for an ongoing contract for feasibility studies on the
Western Wake. Western Shore, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I'll just make an observation that I went to these meetings when they first began, and our whole logic behind this is, I remember when I first started going to them, I gave some thought to not going, because Pittsburgh's so small, and it seemed to me the risks of not being at the table were a lot greater than the risks of having to pay our fair share. It's a little spooky and scary to be thinking, right, so far the cost to participate has been measured in thousands of dollars, 5,000 here, 10,000 here, now we're up to 25,000. It's a little scary to look ahead to the day when the JLP brings us a briefing that says, okay, we're done with all of our studies and engineering analyses, and the state says we're good to go, so now we're going to build a plant, and Pittsburgh's share will be $10 million. That day, I don't know when that's coming, but or what the number will be, but I still think we need to be at the table, even if that big scary number is kind of hanging out there. You said something that kind of piqued my interest. Maybe Durham will own the plant, and we'll just be water customers.
Yes. The last meeting we had, the thing I do recall was when you look at critical path on who has the biggest need for water first going out 10 years, it's Pittsburgh. Durham and Cary and those folks have water purchase agreements. They've got longer horizons, and we've got a more immediate need if you believe our growth demand curve.
Well, we got to get that synced up with. There's no point in having all that water if you got no sewer plant to process it when we're done with it. So.
Correct.
But still, my whole point was I don't think we can afford to walk away from this table at this time.
The good news is we don't spend it unless we have to. So we'll see what the partnership develops, and I'll report back on what we're talking about doing. And, of course, get your approval or get your comments to modify.
So do they have an estimate for the year's expenses that help us develop that $25,000 figure?
There's nothing solid estimated to date. The 25,000 is kind of I just kind of estimated that based on previous expenditures, the annual fees, and things like that.
Do they develop an annual budget?
There's an annual Jordan Lake Partnership fee.
It's just overhead for Durham. Durham is the, Durham is all the purchasing and contracting.
They do all the,
right. They do all the contract solicitations and whatnot, and so they are taking it in maybe which is certainly fair for the time of their staff to do the purchasing contract. So.
The Western Shore Partnership does not, we've not developed a budget yet.
But typically what they do is when they get ready to undertake them, they call it, what do they call them, sub-projects or some buzzword they use. When they get ready to undertake the next element of work, they'll put out sort of a scope of work, and they'll ask everybody who wants in the game. And so far everybody says, well, I want in the game. And then they'll put a cost estimate out there, and they do what you have asked for is they'll give a total, and then they'll break it out as a share per municipality or per government unit.
That's going on right now with the Jordan Lake Partnership. The COG has provided some recommendations on moving forward with the larger group, and so that's being looked at in a subcommittee. I haven't seen it yet. It involves drought studies and drought emergency plans and things like that.
So again, we may, I think Nancy and I can look at whether or not that's properly sourced in the budget. So we may have a little bit of room to work with in the general fund, a little bit more room to work with in the general fund, getting that balance, but we can come back to you with that. Powellville, you'll recall that we received money from DOT to help maintain non-state streets. And that money is dispersed on a basic formula. I believe 25% is non-state street mileage certified, and 75% based on population, which is inching up over the last few years. So you combine that, and our Powellville actually, the monies that we received for Powellville is actually inching up more than what we've actually been budgeting for the last few years. And I think this year is another case. But I think we budgeted 120 for this year, and or the previous fiscal year, I think we budgeted 120, and I think we're going to be receiving somewhere in the neighborhood of 125.
Just shy of 125.
125, but so I think we're conservative to a fault probably in this one as well, and putting in 120, but that's what we're going to go with right at the moment. $25,000 contributed to ongoing sidewalk projects and/or some other sidewalk possible repairs that might come up. $15,000 we can use for street sweeping, and I'd like to propose that, since we are eligible to use Powellville funding for street sweeping, I think that would be a benefit from an appearance standpoint, as well as I think there are some credits, not to give Fred too much of a speaking part, but I think we have some stormwater credits that we can gain through a street sweeping.
Some of the review at the end.
Okay.
Credits.
Okay, so there's an advantage there, and I think Mr. Poteet just sort of guesstimated a rental cost of about $15,000 to do most, if not all, of the non-state streets in Pittsboro. Or were you including Hillsborough Street on that?
Well, including Hillsborough, Thompson, Cradle, just the most traveled streets, mainly right in town. I didn't go out in the neighborhoods or anything like that.
Okay, but we can't spend Powellville on state?
Well, we couldn't on the Hillsborough section, but that's a small section. I'm talking about through the downtown area. But all of Austin Street we can, and Salisbury too.
So we can or cannot?
We cannot on the Hillsborough section.
Can't do it downtown?
No, we can't. But that's a small part of it. most of it was other streets like Salisbury, Thompson, and Cradle. But on Hillsborough Street, that's just a small portion.
So if we contracted that service out, and the service, this contracted service went through Thompson and Hillsborough and some of those state areas, where could we source that funding, or how would we pay for that? Would that be a general fund expense?
I would do it as a package and get them to give me a bid for all the streets and do it as a package. And I guess we can just keep that part separate to pay for it from funds or something. But I think during the street fair, it's only like a couple $100 to get that section from Cradle Street, go around the circle, come back up. I think it was only like $200 anyway. So you're talking $200 every 2 weeks, $400 a month.
And that was for this $15,000 was for every 2 weeks, and we talked about every 2 weeks.
Right.
So if you guys have objections to doing that or doing it that often, now is certainly the time to talk about it. I think there's a previous experience. I think there's a really good benefit to doing that from a number of perspectives, and so that's what I'd like to try this year. Someday we'll probably have to be in the business of obtaining a street sweeper. I don't think that day is going to come yet, because those were I don't know if back when Mayor Terry was Mr. Terry in previous life, you guys managed, but those can be pretty expensive pieces of equipment.
Well, there's two of them, and they, and I don't remember what I used to pay for those, but it was something $250 million range.
The brushes are, maintaining the brushes.
Yeah, and the maintenance on them is like maintaining an airplane, they're very complicated.
So, I don't want to beat that one into the ground, but that's something I'm considering as far as I recall, this would be new under Powell bill. And $80,000 for street resurfacing. I provided a handy table on this, and most of these were identified. I think all of these, but Salisbury, were identified in the pavement commission survey as being the most critical. Of course, strangely enough, Salisbury wasn't rated as critical as these others, and I don't recall exactly what the rating criteria was that kind of excluded it from that group. But I think, according to my naked eye, all of Salisbury can use some attention, and it's central. It's central in appearance, and it receives quite a bit of traffic, and is a big part of our downtown activities. And so this figure, this estimate right here, would be from Hillsborough to Small Street. So I guess that would be the east side of Hillsborough, or east side of Salisbury. My recommendation, and I think we did this last year with Credo. We probably bid out the entire thing and see what of it we could do, and if we needed to come back and modify a capital budget, and that's what we would do, and put it to you and see if you would want to take on all of Salisbury. I think you were thinking instead of 45 just for that one half, that all of it could be done for a little bit over 60.
Around 60, you can do the whole street. And I think my suggestion was maybe to do the whole street so we won't
get
on that thing when we're doing odd like this. MLK, we've paved half of it, but the other half needs paving. And you can argue that the whole thing needs paving, so we should have just went ahead and did the whole stretch when we decided to do it, in my opinion.
MLK is still pretty highly rated as far as needing attention, and that was in the first cut, and we can always, I think we can revisit that depending on how
But the fairgrounds part has been done more recent than the part on this side. But we still looking at 7, 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago.
There's a lot of spidering on the food line.
Do we have Powell bill fund balance?
Yes, we do. It's around $120,000 right now, but it still has the rest of it.
I think we tapped into that last year. to about 55 or something like
Right,
that, right?
but we have pledged against that, and money for highway, the Highway 87.
Sidewalk.
And sidewalk and East Street sidewalk. So from that, there's about, I think basically it's pledged then, and I think that the numbers in my head just went up. So we really don't have it, if you think about it. We haven't spent it yet, but it's.
The 55?
The 55 will be purposed towards the East Street and the Highway 87 projects. So right now, what we have in fund balance for us, 325,000, is really not available since it's pledged to those projects.
And that's, you recall previous discussions, you really don't want to use the words Powell bill fund balance in any official capacity. They don't want you carrying a Powell bill fund balance. In fact, there are penalties for doing so over a period of time. And so I think part of the plan was just to make sure that we either had that pledged or spent. And so that accomplishes both. And I think this proposed budget would keep us within our current Powell bill payments for this year.
So we would be spending next year's Powell revenues on this.
That's correct. And that would be our upcoming payments that we'll receive as reflected in this table and in paragraph.
But I guess I'm asking, you say 125, and we're pledging 55 of that in last year's budget, this current year budget. Is that?
55 is part of the 125?
Yeah.
For the balance.
Okay. So is there 70 that could possibly use
Yeah, but
this?
that's also part of that 125 is pledged either through East Street sidewalk or the Highway 87 sidewalk. So basically that money is not even considered not available. So we just haven't spent it.
It's an encumbered fund balance.
Exactly.
We've batted this around. I see that the listserv, this is a really hot topic on the listserv, and I think something we may want to think about for next year. And Nancy, when she first got here, created a Powell bill dashboard that we've been playing around with a little bit to at least have kind of an on-the-fly idea of. That's why she's able to regurgitate what we have in fund balance right now. It was always difficult in previous years, and so we could actually dial that up and see what we have in it. Maybe next year's budget we might consider actually separating out Powell bill entirely and creating its own fund so that it's completely transparent. Because I think by that time we'll have everything. There'll only be a lightly encumbered amount, or we'll be able to spend it pretty much clean. So the funds, it'll balance out like a regular fund should. But as of this year, this is kind of what we're working on. So, any other comments or questions on that? The other item that tends to get a little bit of attention would be capital equipment. And what we would be proposing to do with general fund revenue expenditures would be to replace, you've heard this one before, the backhoe at the utilities department, and replace one aging truck that would be used on streets. And Mr. Poteet, you want to talk a little bit about our old friend, the backhoe, and what kind of cost we would be dealing with on that?
Okay, well, the cost I think I put in the budget is $80,000 to have that replaced. But we plan on using it as a backup backhoe, and so we can have just in case we have an emergency and our backhoe doesn't work, we've got another one we can depend on. Right now, we just got that one, and it's in the shop. Hydraulics is starting to give out on it, and that's one of the most important pieces of equipment that we have is the backhoe. That borderline brakes, whatever, picking up heavy brush, we really need that piece of equipment.
So the backhoe, the backhoe itself would cost the total price tag on the backhoe, and the backhoe itself is, you said $80,000.
It was the 80,000.
80, I just double checked.
What?
80 is what we used for
Yes, we
the
used that in the budget
calculation.
figure.
So, but what we would be proposing to do, and essentially we can get into this here in just a minute, but what we would be proposing to do is making some of these, combining some of these purchases through installment. For example, the backhoe and the truck from the general fund side, we would be totally financing, or we'd be looking at financing in total an estimated $119,000 for those two items. And our payment for a fiscal year on that installment purchase for this fiscal year, so our out-of-pocket cost, so to speak, would be $31,478. And Nancy, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, but operationally it would be pretty similar to what we were doing with Chief Crutchfield's police cars.
Right, yes. The only difference is with this is that I scheduled 2 semi-annual payments versus police department's just one payment per year, but it's supposed to pay an interest by having a semi-annual payment, and it was calculated at 2.25% over the period. And even I think 2.25 is conservative. You received 1.98 per seat on the.
Yeah, it was 1.98.
1.98 for UPTV. So I think it'll probably be around 2%, but wanted to be conservative with that. And the thought was to use some cash and to also use installment financing for some of our capital purchases as you see on the list. And what's not on there, I forgot to include 8,300 for the 2 trucks that we financed.
Okay, and we'll get to that on the enterprise.
Nancy, just a quick comment. My Chapel Hill experience, we financed cars and light vehicles like pickup trucks for 3 or 4 years, but the heavy equipment has much longer service life, so we put down for 7-year loans. I don't know whether that's something you want to look into or not, but so when you get something like a backhoe, you keep it for 20 years, don't you, John?
I think the one that we have now was purchased in 2002, maybe.
Okay, so that's 13 years ago?
Yeah.
So it's not real risky to finance something like a backhoe over 7 years. You're certainly still on it.
And I can certainly look into that.
See if the bank's interested. There's pros and cons. You pay more interest all the time, but you got a pocket expenses.
Mr. Mayor, what about this if we change that backhoe wording to snowplow, and we can make one resident in town happy with it? That gentleman that keeps calling all the time. Backhoe / snowplow.
It just puts something on it, right? It can be better.
Yeah.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry.
People say, look, I made a difference.
Yeah.
The town listens.
Well, Commissioner, I needed that little.
I guess that settles it. It's a track hoe with a blade.
But we do use tobacco for snow removal, so.
There you go.
County owns it.
But to point out though, to that point though, I don't know how much we talked about this in the days and weeks following those snow events, but maybe I did mention it. But we actually did purchase two. Did we purchase both of those, or did we get just the one?
Yeah, well, we got one installed, and we did purchase 2. We installed one, the salt sand spreader for the pickup truck, so we did do that.
Yeah, our system for spreading salt, and I guess I had always assumed that we had one of those sitting back in that shed somewhere, but our system for spreading salt was literally to have one of the guys on the back of our truck going to the intersection with their hands and spreading the salt, which got, I guess depending on perspective, it got the job done. But what we have now is some equipment to actually get out and spread salt and sand a lot quicker. So we're going to be able to turn around and hit problem areas more efficiently and a lot harder. And I warned Mr. Potita on this. I mean, we're going to be in the self-storage business now, in the sand storage business now too. So we're going to have to be accounting for purchasing some of these items maybe in ways that we didn't before, and storing it. So that's a good point. We joke, but that's those are the things that I think we have to deal with as we acquire more streets and get more people like our friend who expect, right or wrong, a certain level of service. So anyway, lots of fun. We'll keep working on that. But I have here is again is the backhoe and the utility truck and delayed the purchase on that. And then we also within capital equipment, we're looking at replacing the accounting software. There's a continuation in debt service for the police vehicles. If you recall last year we talked about a pretty hefty fear of mine as far as the HVAC equipment, and I think we plugged in 10,000 there to keep it limping along. If we have some emergencies, we may have to come back, and take a look at that because that system back there is it's basically the same system that we had when the building was built, and we can keep it limping. We're kind of coming up on that. We're kind of coming up on that period in the lifespan of a facility where once you get to the point of not being sure how much you're going to stay in it, how long you're going to stay in it, it's not as if you want to spend six figures on maintaining a lot of elements in the building if we don't know exactly what we're doing with the building. So, I mean, my recommendation is to plug in some amount for improving things like the HVAC, and then just catch can revisiting some of these things if we have to in midstream. That's the only way I think to keep our budget sanity at the moment. And then also too, we're plugging in a new and used vehicle for planning and engineering. That money, $25,000, I think may even be a little bit high, but we need something that's probably four-wheel drive-ish to get in on construction sites. And that is coming from, I think 100% of that is coming from Chatham Park investors. Actually, that's not necessarily coming from civilian taxpayers. So that is that as far as, those are the highlights as far as general fund capital equipment is concerned.
One quick. On the utility truck, is that a dump truck?
I think that's the utility truck. I think is just a regular.
That was 29,000 and change.
drive.
It was 29,000 and change is what you quoted me on that one.
I thought it was 25.
I'm at 29.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a four-wheel drive truck. I think that one is a extended cab to be able to get equipment inside the back corner.
So it's not a big one.
Right. I didn't know dump truck because.
Oh no.
So it's like a three-quarter ton pickup?
That one, the utility one.
Extended cab?
Yes.
What's the age of the current vehicle?
Well, I don't have those figures with me, but 2002, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's 2002.
I think we had, the two trucks is 2002, and I think one truck was 2000.
That sounds right, John.
Yes.
So those are the biggest highlights on the general fund side. The enterprise fund revenues is probably a meatier discussion. We can either tackle that and start tackling that tonight, or keep going in other directions if you want. But the main issue that the enterprise fund revenues, as I indicated in the previous memo on the budget that was submitted a few weeks ago, is that this draft would contemplate an increase in water and sewer rates by 9.5%, 2% base, 7.5% in utility, and the budget ordinance that you have in that packet reflects the usage rates. This increase would allow us to in essence balance the general fund would in essence allow us to balance the enterprise fund so that we weren't faced with the situation of subsidizing it in imbalance with the general fund balance or going into enterprise fund balance like we had in previous years, and this was also a concern I think that you guys had expressed in previous retreats. So we kind of tackle it from that angle. Ms. Semple has some information that she's prepared and we have before you this evening that we can talk more about tonight or pick that up at the subsequent meeting if you want more time to digest how some of that would kind of scale out over time, because I think the important thing is, and this came out during our work with the School of Government, the Environmental Finance Department, I think the thing to consider is not just taking a look at a year-to-year attack or approach, that I think what Nancy's prepared is some estimates of what it would take, okay, if we do this right this year, then this is, maybe moving things forward and planning things forward. This may be what we're faced with, considering how our system operates in future years. So, a decision this year could, what I'm trying to say is a decision this year could end up affecting us in subsequent years, and it's a matter of when do we want to actually start tackling that. I mean, even operationally, a decision we make this year could impact future years. So we can get into that tonight if you want. If you want more time to kind of digest and kind of look that over, that's fine too. But what we have in front of you tonight, this increase that we have in front of you tonight is what it would take to balance, if that is the key decision you want to make in this budget period. Obviously, if we were to take a look at rates that were lower than that, then it would create an imbalance. And as we go down and we take a look at some of the capital things that we're proposing, we can start knocking some of that down. We can play with the numbers a little bit if we hold off on doing certain things. So it's a matter of these choices that we have in front of us, and how badly we want to continue forward with capital improvements, and how much of a tolerance we can take as far as raising rates. Now, I'll plow through this here real quick, and then maybe we can get to that stuff. But enterprise fund expenditures, we're looking at a little bit over $383,000 that's obligated to debt, and I didn't include the debt schedule for you this evening. If you have it from last year, it's still the same schedule, and we'll include it in upcoming. We'll include it in the final version, obviously. But this is down quite a bit from the previous year. I think we were up over 480. We were.
It's down considerably based upon the.
If you had the schedule in front of you, it'll go down even more next year. And so within that expenditure, we've got a pretty hefty proposed purchase here, $45,000 for replacing the current outmoded billing system that we're using. I think we could gain efficiencies from having. Ms. Stinson did excellent for years on the system with dot matrix and everything else like that we had, and I think now we're looking at kind of bringing the entire system into the 21st century. And so it cost $45,000 to do that. We held off on it.
Actually, 55 for total.
Oh.
10,000, 45,000 is the enterprise fund part, because the general fund also the miscellaneous receipts, which we do like plan reviews and things like that that we'll take in through. So I felt that the general fund should also pay a portion of the cost.
Yeah, that's what this is right here. So yeah, $55,000 total would be coming out. 45 would be coming out of enterprise. Also contributing to expenditures. I think in previous years it's been discussed. I know it's really kind of come to a head this year with some of the emergencies that we've had within our water system. At the water treatment plant, what we're looking to do would be to add a full-time position that would allow us to make sure that we had someone available to pull levers and push buttons when things like severe pressure drops and water vacates our elevated standpipes. It causes us to lose water supply and pressure deficiencies, which cause things like courthouses to burn down. And so essentially, the water treatment plant would add a position to make sure that we can do round-the-clock scheduling. And that's been factored in with this proposed budget as well. Capital improvements include, and Mr. Pickett can talk a little bit more about this too, but capital improvements would include some electrical upgrades in the plant, 18.5 for pump watering and sludge removal, build media filter rebuild 55, and filter backwash pump, another installment, installment purchase. And we would be looking at enterprise fund installment purchase financing of $97,000 for the filter, and then 2 utility trucks. 2 utility. Is that not responding? So the 2 utility trucks would be down here as part of the enterprise fund's overall purchase budget, and those would be proposed for purchase through installment financing as well, at that $97,000 figure, and we would be looking at the $11,000, I guess, for the first purchase installment on that. So wastewater treatment plant's a little less aggressive. What we're looking at is and this is even dependent, I think, on the PER report, but we're looking at $20,000 for sludge and piping, sludge pump and piping valve improvements. Depending on what comes out in the PER, we can hold on this. Theoretically, that could even go up, but there's a chance that could be drawn back entirely. Again, I mentioned the utility trucks would be used out on the actual distribution system. So any maintenance, upkeep, and construction that would be done on the water and sewer pipe system that's around the town, those 2 trucks would be servicing it, and that's why they wanted to enterprise. So, in sum, on this enterprise fund side, a lot of this we can toy with a lot of this stuff and get this number, get the expenditure number down to such a point that we may not be looking at an increase. But if we're contemplating doing everything and balancing the budget, then the increase is right here, and Nancy has more information on that. But maybe before we get into that, Adam and Randy, if I hit those items, Adam first, I guess you want to talk a little bit about some of those proposed purchases that you have on your slide.
Any questions y'all have on any of those proposals that are up here? The $55,000 for the dual media filter rebuilds. We have 4 filters. That's all 4 filters. I mean, that's, we can do 2 at a time. If the $55,000, that's a lot of money. So we could propose to do 2 at a time. Come back at a later date, do the other 2. Yeah, we had a company come out and do a filter evaluation, and normally this number was previously $80,000 from 2 different companies, and we have another company came out and he actually quoted $55,000 to do the exact same job. And he's a reputable company. They traveled the United States, extensive experience in this work. So I mean, I feel comfortable using him. The backwash pumps, of course, I mean, I know it's been on the capital improvements list, for a long time. Of course, it's still there. The current backwash pump is operating, but if it goes out, like we said, we're going to be, within a week's time roughly, we'd be out of water. Unless we had some type of emergency repair come in, which is with the design of the current existing backwash pump, it would be very difficult to get it up and running in a timely fashion. Electrical upgrades, that number was originally, I think, gosh, I want to say it was like 50 grand. In talking with the electrician that we currently have, we can go a couple different routes, still upgrade the system, as you see, for about 10 grand. So there's considerable savings on that item as well. So any questions y'all have? I mean, this is like a home run swing here. If all these was done, I mean, this would really get it up to speed. But in all honesty, the dual media filter rebuild, while it's needed, we can buy another couple of years out of the filters. I mean,
so when you say filter rebuild, is this just replacing the sand?
This is complete rebuild from bottom to top, coatings, complete rebuilds. I mean, they would be good for another 20 years.
Okay. And that hasn't. So in my experience here, we've replaced the sand at time.
The sand has been replaced at times.
You're talking about a level of maintenance well beyond that.
Okay, oh, absolutely.
Well, that's probably never been done.
I want to say in some papers I found, I think maybe in '97 was the last rebuild of one we had. 18 years.
So you feel like that's a especially good price that may or may not be available in the future?
I think it'll still be available. I think from this company, now even it may be 60 next year, but we know everything goes up, but I feel like it's a pretty concrete number.
Yes. What about the dual media filters, rebuilds $55,000, and the filter backwash pump is $14,000? Is that right?
No, that's not correct.
That's the installment payment, if we were, that was more like $55,000 as well.
It's like 55.
Yeah, so that's what it would be over, but that would be our installment for year one. If we were to purchase it, installment purchase.
And that would be how long of an installment?
I calculated 4 years.
Mm-hmm. So that last payment would be a little bit less.
A little bit less.
And the bank will do that sort of fiscal plant building. I think they did one of those.
Yes.
Since you're building it into a building.
When I called a couple of my banker buddies and said, hey, would you finance this? They said yes, they would. They would use a UCC as for taking title, but yeah, they would do that.
Adam, the dual media filter, is that having any impact on the facility's ability to produce water?
Yeah, I mean, the filter is pretty much the heart of the plant. But from my experience, I mean, why they need to be rebuilt, personally, I mean, I can't come in here and just, beg and plead just yet. I mean, but I still think there is a couple more years of life span in the filters.
What does a filter failure look like?
Well, it would be, you would have what's considered breakthrough, cracks in the media, turbidities would be exceeded, you would have less run times on your filter, and we really hadn't gotten into much of that yet. You can start seeing the beginning stages, but, and I mean, I've seen some really rough filters, a lot worse than ours are, and right now, I mean, we're producing very good water. I mean, we have a great pre-treatment program, and I mean, we don't use our filters a lot. I mean, we use them for what they're used for. I mean, a lot of water plants can really put a strain on their filters, and if we was like that, then of course, it reduces efficiency.
So, post-construction, what would you expect the difference is? Is the water estimate plant more quickly, or?
It's the same. It will just be may have a slightly higher removal of certain organics. You prepare for maybe increased flows as demand increases.
Increased water quality, but not dramatic.
Right. for that.
So basically, this is insurance against the possible filter failure.
Exactly.
And I get what you're saying, it's just like any piece of mechanical equipment, right? It's like it here, okay. It's going to fail this year, next year, or the year after that.
Absolutely.
You're right to say you don't know if it's going to,
In previous budgets, I would always kind of twist Adam's arm a little bit to try to determine which of these things we could live without. And, I didn't really do that so much this year because I know a couple of those things we hadn't talked about.
I was twisting instead.
Oh, you were twisting?
Yeah.
I apologize. And it's just like, I think some of those major items in previous years, I felt kind of because of the imbalance that we had in enterprise on the side, I didn't feel like we could tackle everything at once.
so this is affordable with the rate increase you suggested?
Yes.
With the rate increase, it's balanced.
The filter backwash is what you have indicated. If that goes a week's time without it being fixed,
Yeah.
the town of Pittsburgh is out of water.
Exactly, and the existing pump that's there is dated, and I believe it's it's like a 65 model.
Yeah.
I mean, but while it still works just fine, it's like Mr. Mayor said. I mean, I don't know, it could go out tomorrow, and especially with the coming development, it's going to be nice to have something for contingencies. I mean, for redundancy. We would be able to exercise both pumps, and we're able to do that in every pump we have, our raw water, our finished water, but the backwash water, which cleans the filters, the heart of the plant, we only have one pump and it's old.
So if there was a new one put in, the old one would still be working?
Absolutely.
And it would alternate?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that, so you're going to build in a redundancy there.
Sure.
So that's a major improvement. I like that.
So how much is the filter backwash pump costing?
50 to 55ish.
That's included then in that dual media filter repair?
That's the dual media. No, that's a separate.
That's separate.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
that's $55,000. Okay. And you anticipate putting that through an installment?
Yes.
Okay.
Along with the two utility trucks that would be used to help service the distribution center.
Okay.
So that we'd be looking at, we'd really, enterprise in general, we'd be really looking at two different installment purchase type contract, flavored contracts. We would be looking at one contract that would be purchasing a backhoe and a truck to help with streets. And then we would be looking at another contract that we'd be using to purchase two utility trucks and the filter backwash pump.
And I can roll all into one for debt financing, so I could combine them all into one and then just account for it through our own accounting system. So that's one of the things that when I was talking with various banks, that they said we can roll it all into one, and then I would just carve out what belongs to the general fund and what belongs to the enterprise fund. And we probably get a better rate by doing that because it's a higher loan.
Nancy, I think you said, and as I recall, is it 2016-17 where debt service really falls off the cliff?
It drops off, not right now. 15-16, but 16-17 it falls off considerably, which is why I thought that we could do some of this installment purchasing and maybe pay it down faster. But this is a way that we can get some of those capital improvements that we need and use our money wisely.
And this wouldn't even come close to replacing the funding levels that we're experiencing this year and last year, actually, which was significant, like $475,000 or something like that in debt service.
Yeah,
last year was 470, 473, almost 474. Drops down to 382, and then 16, 17, we're looking at 169, 526.
But we also might have through the I&I loan some debt service as that goes through. That's about a $500,000 loan. I don't know what that debt payment will look like yet. I don't know if it's interest-free and how long it might be.
But that would even be pushed back, those items that push back 2 years.
Right.
Again,
Yeah, we may have to pay an administrative service.
Yeah,
That would be it.
2% will be coming, not to complicate this too much, but once we have that bid out, the contract bid out, whatever improvements have to be made, then we would have to have like an escrow of some sort of 2% of the contract amount. So that would be loan, that would be what we'd have to pay right out of the box. Whatever we finance would be backed out to, let's say it starts in 16, 17, we wouldn't be looking at a payment until probably 19, 20, or 2021.
Possibly, and again, our debt service looks a lot better at that point. So.
Yeah, we're looking at a debt service of, it stays right around 90, all things equal, it stays right around 90,000, low 90s for quite a while. So,
Adam, can we talk about your proposed position for a minute? What's your total staffing out there now? You got 5 or 6?
Total staff would be 5.
5, okay. Used to be 6.
Used to be 6.
And then we solved the problem at the wastewater treatment plant by rather than adding a person, we shifted a person. Is that 4 years ago now? So adding a person back there, I understand what you're saying about stretching the schedule out. But are you guys burning a lot of overtime now?
Not necessarily that we're running overtime. I don't know if this is, this would be put a body in the plant mostly 24/7. We're running, as far as actual plant run, probably 10 hours a day roughly, to 12 hours a day. But this would put a body in the plant, like for emergencies, have somebody there all the time. Because I know, there is talk, I think, of a proposal of having to maintain a higher elevation, the standpipe, things of that nature. Of course, as we grow, I know, our run times we will be running more, just from that standpoint.
But if you had to lose something up there, what would you lose first?
Dual media filters.
Would the dewatering and sludge removal improvements help the longevity of the filters?
No, that's a separate item per se. It's really kind of probably a tie between the sludge removal and the dual media filters. The dual media filter will resurface again. It's just I don't know if it'll be next year. I hope if we don't complete this, it's quite possible I'll be back next year asking for it. But the sludge removal, that's a separate item. Currently, we're just using a little gas-powered pump. We're wearing one out right every 6 months. This will provide us with a diesel pump that will be there for a long time.
So if we decide to give you this additional position, I suppose we could fund it for just 9 months of the next fiscal year, so it's going to take you 3 months to find somebody to hire anyway, right?
That's correct.
So we could fund it for 9 months, get it in July, August, September, 1st of October.
And even with this position, that would be a minimum of going 24/7. If somebody's sick or has vacation, of course that's going to put an extra strain. But for the majority of the time, I feel like we can cover 24/7 with this position.
Are you making more water than you were 3 years ago?
A little bit.
Just a little bit?
Yeah, maybe
Dramatically so?
maybe 100,000 gallons more a day.
You
Yeah.
run growth, you were at 600.
Yeah, it was 600
and now you're up to
7-ish, you know.
That's significant.
But if we cut back on the flushing some, I feel like that we could drop that number a little bit.
Okay, any other questions about Adam's program?
Am I missing how much the position is?
With Adam's budget, this year's fiscal budget, it has a 0.5 FTE that was being shared between water and waste, but it was only solely being, currently only have that person in wastewater. So it's not that much of a budget increase for him. It's only going up 0.5% or 0.50, half an employee, because he already had a position budgeted that never got filled. Does that make sense?
So that position would just get filled?
Mm-hmm. And it'll go from half-time to full-time.
And what's the cost differential?
Cost.
And then do 75%.
That'll have to, I may not have that with me.
Maybe you can bring that back to us, Nancy.
Yeah, I can get that.
What's the cost and do it at the 75% of it, report date of 1 October?
Well, basically, you're just adding half of that position to go full-time for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they're not, between the two departments, the benefits were all already being budgeted, per se, so it's just bringing it up to, changing it, putting it all in his budget instead of being between two budgets.
Half was with wastewater?
Mm-hmm.
That half position is still with wastewater. It's still on board, is that full-time, really full-time benefits. If that was a position we needed to fill and screen, that's something we can visit at this point as well.
Can wastewater do without that half? Or that?
Well, that half position right now is it could, but it would do so probably at a higher cost, because that person is not necessarily acting as an operator, but he's acting as a lab tech. And so his basic value right now is as a lab tech. So if we were to lose that altogether, then we would have to farm out our lab tech, and then also lose that half-time person from off the bench. And so we could conceivably, Randy's talked about this, we had a version of the budget where we contemplated adding that half position, and a scenario of adding lab costs. And I think we just got approval in this version and just kept it this way, thinking that we could revisit this later. And I'll say too, to kind of put a ribbon on this, that Adam and Randy both have done a really good job of keeping the plant operating at on a bare bones basis. I think you'll recall during the retreats that Randy I think really improved a lot of efficiencies as far as purchasing chemicals and keeping the plant operating in spite of some of the I&I issues that we've had and some of the bypass issues that we've had. I think it's kept it running really from a financially stable position. I think you guys are aware of some of the kudos that Adam's received recently, and in a lot of ways, I think they've been operating and doing really well without necessarily having a Cadillac budget. So. And some of that's been out of necessity because we've just flat out been a struggle to keep our enterprise fund, anywhere near shouting distance of being balanced. And so our marching orders were to try to give you something that was balanced. And this year, if you're willing to tolerate a rate increase, we can do that. If you don't want as high of a rate increase and you still want the balance, then we're going to have to do without some of these other things. So.
I want to echo Mr. Brucebeck's comments about these guys being great stewards of the taxpayers' money. The water plant was the water plant, what it really needed was about a $2 or $3 million renovation about 4 or 5 years ago. That just wasn't going to happen. So So over the years, we've given them a little capital money here, a little capital money there, and they've, especially the water plant, they did a lot of self-help work, painting their own offices, laying down their own carpets, or tile. So these guys, they really get a lot of bang for the taxpayer dollar, and I appreciate that.
And not to hijack the conversation, but even going above and beyond, and I think you guys are familiar with an email you received from one of the area's citizens on a chemical that is being studied by NC State. Adam is working with that professor and providing that information, even though we're not required by the federal government to monitor it or treat it at this point. And so, I guarantee Adam knows more about that chemical. What's the name of it again?
140-oxane.
Okay, stop. Stop right there. Adam knows more about that than just about any other treatment plant in this area. And we're not required to do anything. So, anyway, these guys deserve, I think, even better than what they're getting. But again, our goal and our mission is to make sure that this thing isn't run into the wall. And so I think this budget, more than the others, takes a pretty big step to doing that if we want to. That's about all I have to say about highlights. I don't know if we want to go into, if you guys at some point either tonight or you want to take another opportunity to just to go into line by line stuff. And any questions you guys about specific lines? I wanted to just kind of start out at a little bit of a higher altitude, and if you guys needed to buzz in closer, then we can certainly do that.
Well, I'll say it. I'm going to really have a hard time with a 9.5% rate increase. I'm really struggling with it. I can hear it around town right now, So I'm really going to have a problem with that. I know we need all these things in our departments, but to me, that's a lot.
In reference to the increases also, where it says on here 2% base and 7.5% utilities, can you give me an example of what the 2% in terms of dollars, how much that base amount would be? Possibly.
Yes.
I think it's in the 20.
It is?
I think it's in this version in 21.
Like, for example, on the base rate, instead of it being $13 for the application, 10,
Yeah.
what I'm referring to.
Okay.
So the base service charge right now is $13 for inside water. So it's a 20% increase, and it's $26 for outside, so 52 cents more. It was $14 inside, which is 28 cents, and then $28, 50 cents, 56 cents more for those. And the same thing with the meters under greater than an inch. It was $24, so 48 cents more, $48.96 more. It was $26.52 more, and then 20. I remember it was 26, 27, I think, excuse me, for the outside. So it was, I think it was like $2 more for the outside wastewater. No, less than $1. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I don't remember
Which one are you looking
the last category. I apologize. But I know it was 13 and 14, respectively, and 26 and 28. 24, 48, and then 26, and then 52.
Yeah.
So it'd be $1, yes, $1.04 more.
Yeah.
So that's what the rate change would be from the by changing the base rate and having a 2% increase. And the purpose for that was that you know, as when you're looking at any kind of a rate increase, you expect that your usage is going to fall off. And so one of the ways to try to stabilize the revenue is to increase the base rate, because we're going to charge that base rate no matter whether there's usage or not. So it allows us to try to keep a more steady stream of revenue coming in, because we're going to anticipate with rates going up, people are going to not use as much water, and so their usage will go down. So it's a way to kind of balance it. The economic term is called elasticity, is what it refers to.
Let me get this, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
1326,
So it's a 26 cents increase.
where's the 26 at? I'm sorry.
It used to be 13.
Oh, okay,
13.6.
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Let me just make a quick point here. In paragraph 3 there, you talk about a 9.5% increase. I don't think those numbers are additive. I think you're claiming a bigger increase than you're really making here. I don't think we want that 9.5% in the newspaper, because
Well, it's 7.5% on the volume metrics, on the usage fee, so that's 7.5%.
okay. But I still don't think those two numbers are additive. Here's what I think: you collect the amount of money from the base fee. You're increasing that by 2%.
That's correct.
You also collect the amount of money based on usage. You're increasing that by 70%. So the total increase in somebody's bill is going to be some number less than 7.5%. No, some number less than 7.5%. Part of the bill's increased 2%, part of it's increased 7.5%. So it can't be 9.5%.
No, I can see where you, so that's correct, because the bill has two separate components to it.
Yeah. Part of it's increasing 2%, the other is increasing 7.5%. So if you average the total, it'll be some number less than 7.5% is the total increase in the bill. So I think we want to get that 9.5% out of the literature, so people don't say their bills went up 9.5% because nobody's bills go up 9.5%.
And we need a way to describe it, because if the rates go up 9.5%, but they're not going up by 9.5%, what are they going up by?
Do you want me to work on something?
I got to say something,
Yeah.
because Bill's going to be calling me tomorrow morning, and the information we had at the time was we're increasing rates by 9.5%.
Unless I'm doing math wrong, where's their engineer? Did that sound right?
I think you're on to something.
I was just doing 2, 9, 4. So if you do an average, it's roughly 4.85% increase. If you take 2% to 7.5%, it's 9.5%. Divide that by 2, you get 4.75% increase.
Well, I think the math's more complicated now, because I don't know
That's simple.
What I did with the first, this isn't the first time we've contemplated raising rates. The very first time I did one of those spreadsheets that looked like this. It showed the old rate and the new rate. And that Bill Wilcox seemed to get, not Bill Terry, but Bill Wilcox seemed to latch onto that pretty quick. In fact, he may have even printed it in the newspaper. And so, I mean, maybe something like that would actually, where you've got the old and the new.
I could do that in self-pictures.
Yeah. And that kind of shows you exactly, you can look at that as a consumer, you can kind of look at that and go, okay, I'm usually falling into this category, and so this is what it was before, and this is what it's going to be.
Well, you might even do a typical water bill and show its impact there. If your water bill is $50 and it's broken out into these two components, this is what it means to you. You're now paying $57.
Yeah, and I don't really know sitting here whether the base rate is half of my bill or a quarter of my bill or something.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I can tell you it's a small portion of my bill.
Okay, well then that means the increase will be closer to 7.5 than 2. So it will be 9.
And then you've got these other options on here, that alternatives rather, in terms of 1%.
Right, and that was just trying to give you a quick snapshot of over time. If we did a 1% rate increase and a 5% increase increase, what it looks like, and what I did was send you a snapshot of revenue over expenditures as far as the margin ratio. If we want to be operating at least 1.0 or better, and you can see with these scenarios, and I have actually a really cool tool that I'm using for this, but you can see with that first one, we don't get out of the hole with that. And then in the second one, with a 1% base increase or a 10% usage, that is still not quite getting us out of the hole. You can see in 17 and 18, and that's based on debt service, which is why you see some of those numbers changing. And then the third scenario you see is a 2% base increase and a 5% usage, which gets us closer. And the other thing we're trying to do too, what I was trying to do for us, is to also try to build our fund balance, because we're going to need fund balance for future capital improvements as well. And so the 2% base and the 5% usage is getting us a little closer. And then if we go to the next page line, they have the 2%, 7.5.
It's got wonky.
Okay, there we go. So that one has the 2%, and you can see where we get out of the hole. We have almost $24,000 in net revenue, where our margin ratio is above 1, which is where we want to be, and we're building our fund balance nicely. And then the 2% with a base increase of 10% usage really gets us out of the hole much faster and builds our fund balance even quicker. But again, trying to not have such a huge rate increase, but trying to basically accomplish what we want to do, which is to get us running out of the red and into the black. And this scenario does that with, like I said, with the 2% base increase and the 7.5% usage, based upon what we were proposing for expenditures. So this can be tweaked if we take away some of the capital expenditures that we're thinking about, and it could bring the volume usage down. But I still would propose a base increase, because we wanted, again, to stabilize the revenue stream, knowing that we're going to see usage fall off because of the rates going up. So this is a quick snapshot. I have a Excel tool that I've been using to do this tweaking, but this just gives you a quick scenario of what it would look like, how we can get ourselves back, as we said, out of the red and into the black, and it shows you this over a 5-year period, which again, that will just continue to build as we go forward. And that's keeping these rates static, where we would not be proposing another rate increase. This will, by doing this rate increase now, it's building us for our future, where we wouldn't have to do another rate increase. Because I'm also building into the, I built in a 3.5% expenses increasing every year. So I've tried to put that in if we have something. So it's not trying to keep it static, but factoring in expenditures increasing, and also factoring in with revenue basically increasing based upon more customers being added. I think I did a 2%. Yes, I did a 2% customer increase each year too. So I was trying to bring in, looking at our revenue stream increasing and looking at the expenditures increasing because of the fact that cost is more expensive. So this is also factored into these numbers that you see. So I was trying to be as realistic as I could be with my projections.
Nancy, for each of these scenarios, you've got the 2% increase per year. Based on customers, 3.5% on expenditures per year. Is the water usage per customer the same in each of these years?
No, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's all in my formulas, but it also is based looking at usage. Basically. I can't remember. I have to go back and look at because my spreadsheet has like 20 different tabs to it. I can't remember all. I'm trying to remember all the tabs to it, but it's in the formula. I just can't remember. Okay. I don't want to misquote myself.
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're asking questions.
Is the use per customer a static
figure.
I know it's not static, I just can't remember what my variable is.
Right, because that introduces yet another variable
Yeah.
to try to wrap your
Yeah, so I was trying to bring all that into the equation, thinking that but I also factored in a little bit of, for year one,
Yeah.
the usage coming down because the rates went up, and it's kind of the shock of a rating rate. But then I also was building the fact that usage was going to creep back up again over time.
That's
and
a really
I just
complicated-
can't remember what that variable is right now.
Right, so that's a really complicated scenario.
Yeah, as I said, it's about 20 different tabs on the Excel spreadsheet that's all compiling all of this. So when Ryan asked me, can you put it into one, into one, I said, well, I'll do my best to put it into something that was a snapshot, so.
I mean, we could have had her come up here and wrestle with that, which it is a pretty cool spreadsheet, but that would have taken a lot longer than what we did.
Yeah, well, so it's based on a lot of assumptions.
It is based on a lot of assumptions, that is correct.
And-
But I was trying to be conservative in those assumptions.
Right.
You know, in those, on that
Sure,
too.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
And I know that Jay's having a tough time with the large increase. I am as well, and I've been staring at the decrease in expenditures from a loan carry, and looking at that as an opportunity to reduce the extremity of which you raise these rates immediately, because we're coming into a time frame in the next year or two when expenditures are going to drop substantially, and the rate increase would have a different effect. And I know it's reflected in these figures, so I'm just wondering about the need to increase the fund balance as substantially as this 2 and 7.5 is doing.
That's assuming we don't take on new debt service.
Well, I know we clearly were contemplating that tonight.
One red flag popped up and you said we'll never have to increase rates again.
In this model.
At least for 5 years.
I had a flashback to the day that Townsend's people came into my office. But we don't have that vulnerability. We don't have another customer like that. We have another commercial customer other than Chapel Ridge that's that big.
I mean, if Northwood High School or all the schools popped up and moved, I've always wondered about that. I mean, they've got to be our biggest customer.
Chapel Ridge is probably the biggest.
Chapel Ridge building.
Yeah.
Right.
Chapel Ridge is our largest.
But there are headaches associated with that we'll probably get into.
And UNC actually is a pretty good customer too for us.
When we say biggest customer, are we talking about volume of water or expenditure? Because I think Chapel Ridge is outside, so they're paying double the rate.
They have a special rate. Chapel Ridge has a separate rate.
Yeah.
What did I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Not quite double.
it's up there.
Yeah.
The new medical office turned out
Nancy, what about if we looked into the base rate to go up? 2% was like, what, 26 cents?
Yeah, 26 cents on the inside water.
So assume if we went to 4, that would be 52 cents, right?
So you're thinking maybe is the base rate higher and the usage lower?
Yeah, I mean, how would that?
I have to run it through my analysis tool,
Mhm.
but I'd be glad to do that and see what it looks like.
Mr. Carroll, let me tell you why I would recommend against that, and see if I can say this clearly. The reason I don't like to put a lot in the base rate is because, you at your house, you're going to pay 26 cents more per month. You're a residential customer. Chapel Ridge, taking millions of gallons a day, is also going to pay an additional 26 cents a month. So, I don't like putting a lot of the raise into the base rate because it falls disproportionately on residential and the commercial guys get up. That's why I like to load it into the usage rate.
Here's for charging people more than they would use it for, that they would.
Well, yeah, if you, load it heavy towards the base rate means that the individual homeowner and the big businesses pay the same 26 cents, or maybe $1 or $2.
I would say that would be something that cabinet needs to be going in the paper. I don't know that every average citizen knows that.
Yeah.
That's why I think the water bill example is good that you brought up, that here's what your water bill actually means.
That's right, because currently, for someone who just has no usage, they pay $27 a month, which is $13 for water and $14 for sewer. And so theirs would go up 54 cents. It would go from $27 to $27.54. It was just for this rate. But I like the idea too, and I can do that for typical usage. I can use like 5,000 gallons as a monthly usage fee. That's about average for our typical customer, and I can tell you what that would look like.
Okay.
I think if you stated something based on 5,000 gallons, everybody can go home, look at their water bill and go, oh, this, I know how to translate this. I know what it means for me.
There's still a lot of people that buy bottled water to even their home, which are like, it's in our water. I think maybe sometimes it's fights that they have or something.
I think it's just people haven't got over the bad old days yet.
Right.
It was a newspaper all the time.
Yeah, they hear about it and then they get touched.
I think we still do have some water lines. I know that John's aware of. We still have some bad water problems down around Austin Chapel Road down that way, don't we?
Yeah, Austin Chapel and Hearn Hill, and it's still got some pretty bad areas.
At least they're water in the jar is out, so.
Transmission lines.
Yeah.
We're going to be contracting out with Clarion, right? To try to fill in for Stewart a couple months. Yeah. Well, I am not prepared to go line item by line item at this stage.
Well, I think, yeah, you guys, honestly, I kind of wanted to start off hitting these highlights. You've had those lines for a little while now, and now you know a little bit more about what those lines mean. You can certainly mark that up in the margins. Feel free to give me a call, give Nancy a call, whatever. If you have a simple question on, hey, why is this going up by this percent or whatever, it's fairly simple. It's a fairly simple question unless you feel the need to ask it in front of everyone else in the public. Don't hesitate. Probably even quicker future meetings. Don't hesitate to give us a call about something that's relatively minor in the meantime. I mean, that's what we're doing. This is what we're working on.
Last time it was right up at this.
It is.
And it changes. It changes almost to that. The freshest information is what you have, right there. It gets down into a little bit more detail. And I did compared to last year, I didn't add in pie charts or graphs, but you guys get that stuff around the time of retreat anyway. You guys know pretty much where we're fitting in as far as our current tax rates are concerned by now. You know where our water rates are generally fitting into other communities, and if that makes any difference whatsoever. And I think we're finding out that more and more it doesn't. It's really what we need to be looking at is our own internal operations and how we as Pittsburgh as a town are best able to pay for it. And this budget, as we sit here right now, this budget, I'm a lot more comfortable with this budget than I am with the other one, absent the water and sewer increase issue. That's something that we've been fighting with for a few years now. We've been increasing for a few years now. That's the really big question. I mean, we could even go through line for line and all that other stuff. line for line, when you actually do go through and you make notes on the margins, line for line on this, I still think it's going to be a fairly quick conversation because it kind of is what it is, unless you notice something that completely looks sideways to you. I think the big battle in this year's budget is going to be figuring out what you want to do about this rate increase. I mean, everything else I think is going to kind of fall into place. So, I mean, as much as you guys want to handle and ask you questions and things like that offline about everything else, don't hesitate to give us a call. I guess, long way around the barn there, that's kind of what I'm doing.
So what's the sense of the board? Do we want to take this up again in our June 8th meeting, or are we contemplating a budget work session in between?
Yeah, this actually worked well because we had, we were done with the regular agenda and then had.
And what does June 8th look like?
Yes, is there a way to push things off to July that don't absolutely need to be dealt with?
I can give you a better idea tomorrow, but I don't think we have a heck of a lot scheduled for June 8th as of yet. We have something with the PER, the wastewater treatment plant PER, that doesn't have to take a heck of a long time. I mean, it's not like a half an hour long time.
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes.
Maybe 20.
Yeah, the only thing I have right now on my list is an 80% update, the PER 80% update right now.
We might have the INI story back.
So sorry, to answer your question, it's looking pretty good for a workshop. We'll do it on that day. Again, it has to be approved. We have one more regularly scheduled meeting in June to approve it. So if you take it up for another discussion on the 8th.
Rewrite it, and you've got 2 weeks to get her done.
Well, famous last words. I think most of the work is, the hard work has been done.
Yeah.
I mean, the grunt work has been done. I mean, last year I was still trying to, I don't even think I was.
You're a finance officer.
Oh.
That's right.
That was a lot of fun last year. By a lot of fun, I mean it wasn't a lot of fun.
Just to be clear, huh?
Yeah, just to be clear. So discussed on the 8th. Mark it up as we need to. If you want to take one more meeting, even after the 8th, and do it, and then we can still theoretically approve it in the last meeting in June.
Here's some good news. There's 5 Mondays in June, so you can actually come in and do it on the 22nd. You get bogged down, you can come in and get on the 29th. I wouldn't have recommended that by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I was really surprised that there are a lot of communities in North Carolina that don't even submit it even after July 1st, which is odd. I was talking to Cyrus City. They get closed.
But it was illegal. I didn't want to test that.
I don't plan on it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done it before.
Yeah.
A long time.
So what I think I'm hearing is the consensus of the board is that we'll ask the manager to try and come in with a light agenda on the 8th. Not only bring on there things that he has to bring, and devote the rest of the meeting to continuing our budget discussion. Is that what I'm hearing? See Latigas and Van LaRosa. Mr. Manager, if you need any other guidance from us?
That works for me.
Okay, so we'll have another budget work session on the 8th. After we get a chance to chew on this, and the manager has invited us to ask questions directly to him, and appreciate that. Okay. Is everybody ready to call it a day, or do we want to go through commissioner concerns? I know what Commissioner Baldwin wants to do. Unless I hear any objections, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Excuse me. How's Mama doing?
She's doing good. She got some neurological.
See, bro.